Howdy folks, and welcome back to the channel. I am Professor Parks, PhD. This is a special live stream tonight, and I am actually starting a little bit early because I noticed I actually laid down for a little bit so that I would be a little bit refreshed for tonight's event, which is the launch of Artemis 1. And judging, and when I coming back, I noticed that the launch clock seems to be seemed to be launching a little bit earlier than I anticipated, so I figured that I would just get started right now. Hopefully my sound is good. I will be checking that momentarily. Before I begin, I would like to thank my patron Dora and my subscribers. You all have made this channel very enjoyable for me, and I hope to bring you a lot of content in the coming months. One of the things that I plan on doing is tomorrow, or this afternoon, I will be giving a lecture about the Artemis project, a little bit more, or a lot more detail about not just Artemis 1, but also what is envisioned with Artemis 2 and 3, and also the Gateway station, orbiting station that are the future Artemis projects will certainly be utilizing. So without further ado, I'm actually going to switch over. Again, this is a last minute sort of thing, so I'm doing this from home, and I only have my one small screen. So if you will bear with me when it comes to sharing my screens and such. What we have here is NASA Live, down here, and I have muted it because obviously I am here to give my own commentary as to what's going on. So from what you can see in the upper left, we are at T-minus 10 minutes. The last time I checked this, the launch was scheduled to be at 1:04 Eastern Standard or 6:04 Universal Time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop that out. Got it. And I am going to check my stream on my phone. Let's see. Can I find it? Content. Live. I have another way of checking this. Let's see here. Let's go to Discord. Let's go down here, and my cats are cracking out. Awesome. Oh, seems my sound is good. So I will just keep that there to monitor it. And let us go back to NASA Live. So, and actually what I want to do while I'm here, I know this is probably going to be very exciting for folks who are watching this later on, but I do, let's see, what if I searched for myself? Here we go. Here we go. How do I mute this? Here we go. Oh, I could do it that way. Da-da-da. All right, so this is where I will be watching the chat. Assuming that anyone joins me this evening for tonight's event. it's this is this is just history. I know it's cliche, but this is history in the moment. And I almost missed this. I was so caught up with work and other things that I didn't know until today, actually, that this is one of the reasons why this is a little bit more ad hoc. I didn't realize until this today that this was actually happening. I was so used to the Artemis because of the last two delays and so forth. I really didn't foresee this to be happening anytime soon. But I'm so glad that I was able to see this. I think this is monumentous in that this is our time to go back to the moon. This is where we are on the doorstep of. This mission is obviously unmanned, so it's really a proof of concept. This was something that happened with the Apollo program. You might have wondered why Apollo 11 was the first to put people on the moon. Is because from Apollo 1 through 10, those were essentially proof of concepts for various different stages in the overall scheme or overall plan that NASA had. And so this is very much the same kind of thing, where tonight we're going to see them insert the Orion capsule into lunar orbit and then have the thing splash down again. And one of the things that they're most worried about is the splashdown, because when the capsule comes back down, when it comes back from the moon, it's going to insert into the atmosphere at a very, very high rate of speed, and the heat shield will have to protect the astronauts from temperatures of around 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, which we obviously have not we have not encountered those conditions before. So we'd rather test the safety mechanisms and test those heat shields when there aren't anyone on board than if there was someone on board. For me, I am, if you follow this channel at all, not only am I what's the word I'm looking for? Aspiring, that's the word I was looking for. Aspiring science communicator, but I'm also someone who follows the flat Earth community and talks to folks that don't believe that the lunar landing happened and space isn't real and obviously the Earth is flat and so forth and so on. And so I often nowadays look at missions like this. I often look at missions like this, events like this, through that sort of lens of how is it that this is going to get debunked, or how is it that I can use this footage or this event to better educate folks about the fact that space exists and we're going back to the moon. But I get wrapped up in that, and I fail to appreciate the larger context of what this really means from a humanity standpoint. Obviously, there's been a lot of hay surrounding Elon Musk and this private space industry and things of that nature, and going to Mars and Occupy Mars or whatever his T-shirt happens to mean. But I have always stated, even back when I was in grad school, back in the early 2000s or what have you, if we are going to go to Mars, we need to go back to the moon first. It's more of we need to learn how to walk before we learn how to run. The Apollo program was us learning how to crawl. I think this is going to be us learning how to walk, and then from there we can run to Mars. And And so this is just a monumental occasion, not just for the United States, but also the world. Think that we're all going to remember where we were when Artemis 1 launched, and to be able to see this. And it's really just opening it's a gateway to the future of humanity's expansion into the solar system. And one of the reasons why I think this is so important, one of the reasons why I believe going back to the moon is important as opposed to just going off and going over to Mars, is because, again, with Apollo was a great example. If we had 10 Apollo missions before we even landed anyone on the moon, there are so many things that we need to learn more about if we are going to take those larger steps out into the solar system and go to Mars. We need to learn about how to build habitats. What types of habitats are appropriate for long-term human habitation. The experiments that will be done on Gateway, the experiments not only on the effects of zero-G and on various relative systems, but also the medical experiments and just the medical monitoring that we've done with people already on the ISS, but now we can also assess how quote-unquote zero gravity or low gravity, how that affects the human physiology, because these are things that are going to be of great importance when we try to go out to Mars. And so this is just phenomenal to me. And so so I am very much looking forward to seeing where this goes, seeing this launch, and seeing how successful this is. I'm going to be glued to YouTube and to NASA and Space.com to find out exactly, just to take this step by step. And this is just the launch. Then it's going to get to the moon. It's going to deploy the Orion spacecraft, and it's going to do a retrograde orbit, from my understanding, and then it's going to come back. I cannot wait to see the images that are going to come back from this thing. And so yeah. What this gentleman is talking about right now are the solid rocket boosters that are going to be used. I believe those are solid rocket boosters that are going to be used, that you see on the sides of the, or maybe that is actually I think that is the main rocket. Earlier he was talking about the solid rocket boosters, which are actually reused technology from the space shuttle missions. Like I said, I will be putting together a presentation for my class tomorrow afternoon, Wednesday afternoon. Apparently, I got the date wrong when I actually labeled this live stream. It's actually not Thursday morning; it's Wednesday morning. But I will be giving a presentation about the Artemis project to my class, as I've said, and I hope to use that as a springboard to actually create a 15-minute, 20-minute piece of content to distill all of this down and to basically talk about what this gentleman is talking about in terms of what the rockets are made of, where they came from, and how it's going to propel us, pun intended, into the future. So I'm going to unmute this for a few minutes.
And they're doing a great job at working through those issues. So now we're just waiting to see a new T0 since we had been aiming for the top of the launch window, which opens does open at 1:04 a.m. Eastern Time. Now today is a big deal. Apollo 17 in 1972 was the last time humans stepped foot on the moon. That the rocket you see right there behind us, illuminated in the darkness there, is the first step back towards getting us to the moon. Now, Artemis 1 is the first integrated flight test of NASA's deep space exploration systems. That's the ground systems here at Kennedy Space Center, the Space Launch System, or SLS rockets, and the Orion spacecraft. we will send an uncrewed Orion spacecraft farther beyond the moon than any of the Apollo missions before it. For Artemis 2, Orion will have astronauts on board as it orbits the moon. Then future Artemis missions will land the first woman and first person of color on the surface of the moon. So Kayla, why do we want to go back to the moon?
The moon's a super interesting place to study. It can tell us a lot about the Earth, its own formation, but also more about our solar system. And we also want to return this time in an international partnership for a permanent presence on the lunar surface that'll teach us everything we need to know to travel onto Mars.
And what about for you? I mean,
See,
you
they
have
agree with me as well.
The possibility of maybe being selected for those future missions because the Artemis program can choose from any of you guys, any of the NASA astronauts.
It's a crazy time to be a NASA astronaut. Even imagine that could be real. I think we're all just honored to be a part of the team that's doing this. We're just a small representation of all of the amazing human beings around the world that it takes to do something as audacious as returning to the moon, learning what we need to go onto Mars. So we're just all excited to support the program in any way we can. But of course, a ride to the moon would be incredible. So
Yeah.
I think we're all just dreaming about those moonwalks.
Now, since Artemis 1 is setting the stage for those future crewed missions, is there anything in particular about this 26-day mission that you will be watching? Is it re-entry?
Yeah, we mentioned that a few times throughout the broadcast tonight. The re-entry is a really important part of the flight, of course. And the heat shield, we're interested in seeing how it performs in real life. We've tested it on the ground, but Orion's going to be coming in faster and hotter than any human-rated spacecraft in history. And so we really want to see how the heat shield performs and make sure all the systems can keep the crew safe for that dynamic event.
Yeah, we'll all be watching for that too. It's not just about the launch, the 26-day mission, as we said, so we'll be keeping watch.
Hello, Ryan. Thank you for watching this on your phone. And actually, I am broadcasting the stream, the NASA stream myself.
Today's launch of Artemis 1 was led by NASA's first ever female launch director. Take a look at how she and other women across.
So yes, thank you, Ryan, for watching this with me tonight. Like I said, this is truly historic, and Miss Wise, they paused. I think that's standard operating procedure. So I also missed why they paused, and actually I got on early because I thought the timer seemed to indicate that it was going to launch much earlier than the 1:04 Eastern Standard that they had previously advertised. So, but I think this is, if I remember from previous launches that I've seen, I believe this is standard operating procedure, is that they bring it out. Oh, no problem. Yeah, as I was mentioning before on the stream, I didn't realize this was going on until this afternoon, which is why this was this is sort of ad hoc. I don't have all my screens set up, and so yeah, I'm so glad that I did not miss this. I've been so caught up with work and such. We had a great this evening or last evening. We had a Dr. Stephanie Millam. She is she's from NASA Goddard, and she is part of the JWST project. And she spoke at our Evening Under the Stars, and she gave us an update about all of the science that is just now starting to come out. And it just reminds me of it gives me hope, I guess you can say, in that JWST was a troubled mission in that there were many delays, and its budget ballooned quite a bit. But the science coming out of JWST, the images coming out of JWST are just far beyond expectation. They are literally going to rewrite our textbooks. And so it was a wonderful presentation. We recorded it, and I will, once I get my grubby little hands on it, I will be editing down to primarily concentrate on just her talk. The whole event will be broadcast on the GMU Observatory YouTube channel. So if you are interested in that, and we have this talk series throughout the fall and spring semesters. So as a rule, I'm going to be starting to be taking the previously posted lectures, trimming them down or editing them down and mirroring them on my on my channel, because we've been having some marvelous talks lately, from, like I said, the JWST to black holes, things of that nature. So, and then next week, or not next week, but in 2 weeks, we're going to have Harmony Muir, or Teasel Muir Harmony. She is the curator of the Apollo program at the Smithsonian, and she will be talking about the Apollo program. She has wrote a book recently, Operation Moonglow, which is a political analysis of the Apollo program. Essentially, she goes into why the connections or the motivations behind the administration's push for the space program and what it was hoping to gain from it. So it's a very good book. I highly recommend it to anyone who is interested in history, particularly our history of space exploration. So, I also want to see, one of the things in the book that I'm curious to see if it gets mirrored or similar strategy is going to be employed, is that during the Apollo mission, apparently it was on purpose that the American aspect of the achievement was downplayed. The United States government wanted the Apollo mission to be considered an international effort, an achievement for mankind rather than achievement for the United States. Because really, at that point, we're talking about the late 60s. We had civil rights. We had the civil rights kerfuffle, or that's not a very good way. We had serious problems with the civil rights movement in the sense that it was just coming off the ground. We had, we were just coming to reconcile all of the past discrimination towards the African American community. So we had that on the forefront of the news, and we also had the Vietnam War on the front of the news. So from the government's perspective, really the Apollo program was a huge propaganda machine to basically point out that while our system of government, or our system of government, while our society is flawed, we are at least better than the Soviets. So there's that, apparently. So I am very curious to see whether or not that sort of international messaging goes forward with this Artemis project. It helps that the Artemis project is in fact international, where while a good deal of it is NASA based, a good number of them are, a good amount of the project was done by NASA. The service module, which was what's going to transport Orion to in orbit around the moon and also into re-entry onto the Earth. Kitty. Speaking of our re-entry to the Earth, that is all the European Space Agency. That is the ESA. So this is a collaboration between the main collaborators, I believe, are us, the ESA, and the Canadians, if I remember correctly. I might have that off, but those are definitely. I might be getting that confused with JWST. Just kind of complete, like I said, I realize I may not have completed my thought with JWST. With JWST, like I said, it was a troubled program in that it got delayed and got delayed and got delayed, and then we had the budget ballooned out, but it worked. Finally, when it was launched, there was so much against it. There were 380 points of failure that could have gone wrong. Any of them would have meant essentially the failure of the entire program. And so it gives me hope that what we're going to see tonight, or this morning, or what have you, is going to succeed, and it's going to exceed expectations, because NASA has always been able to surprise me in terms of how it seems to be able to do the impossible. Ryan asks, have you heard whether there's any Chinese project for a moon landing? No, don't worry about distracting me from JWST. Honestly, I don't know. One of the things that I hope to bring up with Teasel is whether or not it is a fair comparison of is the space race that is occurring now, and I do believe it is in fact a space race, whether or not that is comparable to the space race with the Soviets, because one of the key differences between the Soviet approach and the United States was transparency. The United States was completely open with both its successes and its failures. We actually took the capsules that Glenn, that Shepard put up, the Friendship one. I know I'm going to get these wrong. Both the ship that Shepard took to get up into space, and then also the one that Glenn orbited around the Earth. They actually took those capsules and allowed the world to see them, whereas the Soviets were much more literally behind the curtain when in terms of these things. And I find that China is somewhat following that sort of approach, in that while they have definitely stated that they have aspirations for lunar landings, and also a vibrant, I hate to say private because it's China, but a commercial, I should say, a vibrant commercial space industry. I don't know whether or not they've made any sort of aspirations about Mars yet, but to answer your question, I know they have aspirations for doing it, but I don't know of any specifics as to their missions for what they're doing it. I know that they are getting to the point where they're doing what we just did, or what we're doing now, in trying to develop a rocket that they can launch and actually get something to the moon. Let's see what this is.
A whole laboratory of scientists that are able to study all of those samples. We just opened some up for the first time earlier this year, so that we're able to test with new technology.
Luna is very interested in this mission, obviously, because, I'm sure she has family up there on the moon. Isn't that right, Looney? Yes.
About the moon, but just kind of show this off. Apollo 15 moon rock. We're looking forward to having some Artemis ones here at Johnson Space Center. With that, I will send it back to you at KSC.
You were a cool kid before you even had the moon rock. So.
Hey, Carl Edwards, thank you for joining us tonight.
Now the name Artemis was chosen because in Greek mythology she's the twin sister of Apollo. Now Leo Martin will live up nearby.
So we are, if
where thousands have gathered to watch today's event.
Cat, I'm trying to get so.
I'm actually joined here tonight by a very
Where was I going to go? I've completely lost my train of thought. Yeah, all right. Well, there is that. Moon rocks. So given my limited knowledge of rocketry, I assume there's no real role for the ISS in supporting moon missions. Not really. Essentially, what they're going to do is they're actually going to they're going to have something called Gateway, which is an international collaboration, a truly international collaboration like the ISS, where they're going to actually create a space station that orbits the moon. And from there, we have the idea is, and this is going to be put up before Artemis 2, if I remember correctly, which is where we're actually going to set foot on the moon, although that may be Artemis 3. I will need to look that up. But the idea is astronauts would go to Gateway, and then from Gateway they would drop down, they would deploy onto the lunar surface, and then once they were done, they would come back up to Gateway and then launch back to the United States, or launch back to the Earth from there. And so I think in that case they are minimizing essentially the payload that they need to lift and send back down. So I think that will allow, the strategy there is, I think that is going to allow for a lot more materials to be loaded onto the lunar surface and then back up as well. Ah, yes, that's right. 2 is a man's fly around, and then, like I said, you're right, 3 is the landing. Where they're very fond of pointing out that it will be the first, if successful, it'll be the first time that a woman and a person of color have set foot on the moon. I'm hoping that that will not be one person, but rather 2. A woman and also a person of color. But we are getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. We need to really see whether or not this rocket flies. And because if I might take a and imagine the tech that came out of all this. No, I'm with you, Carl. I cannot. Given what I know of the technology that was developed for JWST, the technology that was developed for this, is. People ask us, why is NASA useful? People ask me why do we want to go out to, why do we spend billions of dollars on this? And one of the things that I don't think NASA actually does very well is in advertising, hey, we have, not millions, but we have thousands of patents of technology that we have developed for the use of particular missions that have now been, now have far-reaching applications like Mylar blankets. And I'm sure there are a lot of things that are a long laundry list of things, and so I don't think that, or I don't see the Artemis project being any different. I am sure that there is a technology that is going to come out of this mission that will not only change how we get out into space and space exploration, but also life down here on Earth. Hey, Chris. Yes, it's late. It's time for sleep. I will say that I will not be streaming for very long after the launch, because I have to get up early to meet with students and prepare for my day. I will have yet another long day tomorrow because I will, like I said, I have students to meet in the morning, and then later tonight, or later in the next night, if I can repair the telescope in the interim that day, then I can. Then apparently I am going to be hosting a tour from folks from the Mexican embassy. So there's that. I know very little about that particular. That was sprung on me tonight. So we will see. I doubt I'll actually meet the Mexican ambassador to the United States, but I'm definitely going to be meeting folks from the Mexican embassy, so hopefully I can get the telescope working by at that point, assuming Amazon actually gets us the components we need tomorrow. So, will you be the zombie prof? If I don't get enough sleep, probably. I think that would be a fair assessment. You can imagine the seventh season of The Expanse filming on the moon. Yeah, that would be nice. That would be. I'm actually very curious as to what will be the first scripted show or movie. Probably it's going to be a movie. I can almost guarantee you it's in a movie. What is the first movie that will actually be filmed on the moon? And I can almost guarantee you it's going to be either Spielberg, Cameron, or Michael Bay. I kind of hope it's Michael Bay because real explosions on the moon, hey, I just can't get enough of explosions. No, I do not believe that it will be pornographic in nature. I believe that it will be lots of boom, boom, bang, explosion kind of thing. May not be up Cameron's alley because Cameron really likes, the oceans. So, depending on when it's going to happen, my money is on Spielberg or Michael Bay in terms of who will actually film the first scripted movie on the moon. In terms of the launch, they have taken away the countdown, but the launch again is scheduled for the launch is scheduled for 1:04 Eastern Standard or 6:04 6:04. What's the word I'm looking for? UTC. I know there's a delay between what I am doing on right now and how it gets displayed on YouTube. I think it's probably about a 30-second delay, but go from there. That would be awesome, Chris. That would be fantastic if somebody actually did that. Filmed a fake Martian landing on the moon just to troll people. That would be fantastic. I would love to see that. Okay, those are weirds. I'm kind of curious what these people are doing.
It's often said that the Apollo astronauts had the equivalent of a master's degree in geology by the time they flew to the moon.
Oh,
In
yeah.
the intervening decades since Apollo, we've been training astronauts who fly to the International Space Station because when they're on the ISS, they spend time observing the Earth, looking out the window, taking pictures of what they see on the Earth's surface. Now that we're looking at putting astronauts on the surface of the moon, we also take them into the field. We take them to field sites here on Earth that resemble
Whack.
field sites that we expect.
Rock hammers, definitely geologists.
The reason why we take them out into places that are unique, like volcanic landscapes or places that are analogous to the lunar surface, to train them on the scale and fidelity of science that you just can't recreate in these facilities.
And so by combining this classroom and field training, we're able to prep them.
It's interesting to me that I'm getting. It's one of those things. I don't know if it happens to anybody else, but sometimes you hear one connection, and then you start hearing that same connection over and over and over again. Recently, I learned that one of the students who is a big participant with our telescope, he's actually a geology student. And I was like, oh, okay, going into planetary geology. And now, since then, I've heard of a number of different students who are either originally getting into geology or switching from astronomy into geology. And so I'm curious to know whether or not this new sort of era in space exploration actually had anything really to do with that.
It challenges us as humans and also helps us develop technologies that make our everyday life that much better.
Hey, there you go.
The volatiles present at the South Pole. By using these volatiles, we'll be able to do things like create drinking water, create rocket fuel to launch astronauts back to Earth. And so by harnessing the power of the land, we'll be able to help astronauts establish that long-term sustainable presence.
Right, not so much. Vic and I haven't really talked about the overlap of astronomy and geology overly much. And I don't have a really good answer for that. I have asked him a few questions on there have been formations on Mars that I thought were unusual, and so I have asked his opinion on them to find out what, do we have an Earth analog for this? What exactly am I looking at? But as it happens, and I don't want to speak for him, but as it happens, one of the things that he is very interested in is sort of mineralogy, and when it comes to the varied types of rocks that you might find on the Moon and Mars, from my understanding, it's boring in that regard. Not so much boring in the formation mechanisms, but boring in basically the types of rocks that you could find. There's a sci-fi show story I read, where some hobbyists built self-replicating moon robots whose job was it to produce prefab panels. Yes, actually, that is not so far-fetched. One of the ideas that they're proposing to be able to create these habitats on the moon when we get there is to actually have 3D printers. Now, I mean, obviously, these will be operated by human beings, but it isn't so far out of the realm of possibility that we have AI capable of actually doing that. And so I've heard some arguments from friends of mine that really manned exploration is not the way to go. Anything that we can do, pretty much robots can do better. The only thing that we can do better than robots is repairing things. We can troubleshoot problems better than robots can. But I Can Science That, who is also a fabulous YouTube creator, he's definitely of the opinion that sending folks into space, particularly the Moon or Mars, is really just a waste, or it's risking too much. There's no reason for folks to risk their lives in such a way, because we have robots that are able to do the work, and we have AI which is sophisticated enough to be able to tell them what to do. And I don't know. Okay, this is getting... Thank you, my moderators, for deleting the sex chat site from my comments. That I don't know. I don't know why. That is an interesting question.
That we used during the shuttle era, and I was kind of hypothesizing that maybe it's to help forces if for some reason when we landed in the water we had to get out of the capsule for some reason it would be easy to see us. But that I'm gonna have to take a phone a friend on that one, I think, to know the real answer. I'm sure somebody will be commenting on social media right now with what the real history behind the orange suit is.
I may have to look up why the moon or the spacesuits were orange in color. Can you use solar power and some sort of laser to, I'm assuming that to get at lunar minerals? I don't know if, obviously solar power is going to be I believe the primary power source for any sort of habitation on the Moon. Mars, on the other hand, I don't know. That's actually an interesting question that I probably should look into, because of the way that light, the fall off of light by the square of distance, or the distance 1 over the distance squared. I don't know whether or not solar power will be sufficient for any large-scale structure habitation. In terms of how to get at the rocks, I think just normal drills will be sufficient. I don't know if they'd be using any sort of lasers, particularly since lasers are probably going to be more power hungry.
So for this mission, Artemis 1, it's actually going to orbit the moon and then go into
Thank you, Carl. I noticed that just before I was getting set to go live, I noticed that MC Toon was also doing a live stream on this, and I was like, all right, well, I don't think I'm going to get very many visitors because MC Toon's channel is huge and rightly so, but I figured that I would give it a go anyway, just so I can ramble off philosophically. Jonathan, why no launch yet? I don't know. The launch window starts at 11:04, or excuse me, the launch window starts at 1:04. So okay, they're not talking about it. So I honestly do not know, and I don't think I've heard any explanation as to why they haven't launched yet. But I do know that 1:04 was simply the start of the launch window. And here you go, Ryan. Apparently, this is they're going to be using these drills to get at water.
Polar regions contain water ice in the form of ice just below the surface. With the right technologies, that ice is a game-changing resource that can be mined and used to
Sintering. Yeah, I don't know anything about sintering, actually.
explorers. Under NASA's Commercial Lunar Payload Services Initiative, the agency selected intuitive machines to fly and land Prime 1 on the moon's south pole. Prime 1 will land near the Shackleton crater to drill into the lunar soil in an area that could contain water ice. Prime 1 is made up of two instruments, Trident, the regolith and ice drill for exploring new terrain, and M-SOLO, the mass spectrometer observing lunar operations. Trident will drill up to 3 feet into the lunar surface, extract lunar soil, and bring it up to the surface. Trident drills
Good night, Chris.
maximum depth in multiple phases.
Yeah, I'm also wondering, where is this launch going to
As it
be?
reaches each desired depth, it will pause and retract the drill string to deposit lunar soil on the surface for analysis. This is where M-SOLO comes in. M-SOLO is a commercial off-the-shelf mass spectrometer modified for spaceflight. It will evaluate the chemical elements and compounds released from the lunar soil for water and other chemical compounds. Trident will then proceed to the next specified depth and repeat the process until samples at all desired depths have been analyzed for water. If no ice is found where Prime 1 lands, NASA will still collect valuable information about drilling into the lunar soil for a future mission. NASA's Viper, the volatiles investigating polar exploration rover, will use Prime 1 technology.
I wonder if that was a backogram. If
searching for additional resources.
they backwards engineered that anagram.
Assess lunar resources to inform future conversations and a robust future.
Yeah, for me, Carl, my sleep schedule is just naturally chaotic, so be up for this.
We are still awaiting a new T0 for today's launch attempt, but for more
Backward
on
end, yes.
what to expect when we launch for this first day, let's go to NASA's Dan Hewitt. He's inside our Apollo Saturn V Center at the KSC Visitor Complex.
Hey, thanks, Megan. Everybody, welcome back to the moon board. There's a lot of people here in the complex. I just heard a woo-hoo. People are getting in and out because we have a great view of launch when it's going to happen, and it's going to happen today. But that launch is just the first step in the Artemis 1 mission. So let's look at what's ahead for this historic first flight. As we just said, launch is step number 1. Those 4 RS-25 engines throttle up, followed shortly after by the 2 solid rocket boosters igniting, sending SLS and Orion skyward. Now on our way uphill, we'll have a number of jettison events. You'll be able to see things coming off of the SLS rocket. One of the most visual ones will be these 2 solid rocket boosters. Now they'll expend their propellant a little over 2 minutes into the flight. They will separate. We'll see them flare off onto either side, and then the core stage continues to fire. We're also going to...
That's going to be reminiscent of old shuttle launches.
Once you get high enough in the atmosphere, it's no longer required. You could actually do aborts using engines on Orion and its service module. I will also note that on the launch abort system, it's got those 3 solid rocket motors. The jettison motor is active. The abort and the attitude ones are not for this flight. We don't have people, so we're not flying a fully active abort system. We also have 3 fairings that are there to protect detect Orion, the service module and the crew module, as we're flying up through the really dense parts of the Earth's atmosphere. Next up, we'll hit core stage separation. So we've got 4 main engines. We'll hear MECO, main engine cutoff. Those engines will shut down, the core stage will separate, drop away. It's eventually going to splash down in the ocean. And that hands over the
See,
propulsion duties.
unlike the Chinese, I'm going to be a little patriotic here. Yay, America! Unlike the Chinese, we actually care where our rocket stages actually land.
So the perigee is the lowest part of your
Take
orbit.
that,
You
China.
have perigee, that's your low part, and the apogee, that's your highest point. We're going to raise up the perigee, and that's going to actually put us in a nice circular path around the planet. And while we're there, that gives us time to check out Orion. We're flying it in space for the second time, the first time in this fully integrated stack with SLS. We'll be able to look at all of Orion's systems, make sure those solar arrays are capturing the sun's energy and turning it into electrical power for Orion's systems. Make sure the communications are working, all of our guidance, navigation, and control. That is your time to make sure you have a healthy spacecraft before you do something that is going to send it to the moon. And that's next up on our list. That's the trans-lunar injection. For today's launch profile, that's going to be a firing of about 18 minutes of that single engine on the upper stage. Now that engine optimized for a vacuum, it's producing about 24,000 pounds of thrust. It's a pretty big engine, and it's doing that because we need enough energy to be able to send our payload, Orion, beyond low Earth orbit and send it on a path to head out to the moon. Now after that burn is complete, ICPS separates. It's going to do what's called a disposal burn. So it's going to send itself on a path from Earth around the moon and slingshot out into what's known as a heliocentric orbit.
All right, Ryan.
Completely leave the Earth-Moon system and go into orbit around our sun. But after it separates, propulsion duties get handed over to this, the European Service Module, and it's got a couple of different engines that it's going to be using, and we're going to be testing those out just on day 1. We're going to do what's called the outbound trajectory correction burn 1, and we'll do a couple of these trajectory corrections as we're flying out to the moon, but that first one is that first critical test of this large engine, the orbital maneuvering system engine. That's the one that has the most...
Oh, apparently Triggered Limey is also live.
...pounds of force in a vacuum, and that's what's going to be doing a lot of our maneuvers, or giving us that pushing power as we do these maneuvers around the moon to enter into what's known as distant retrograde orbit, or DRO, and that's this dotted line that you see around here. Now we call it distant basically because of the distance we're away from the moon. We're about 40,000 miles, a little bit less, off the lunar surface, and then we call it retrograde because the moon orbiting planet Earth in this direction, going in a counterclockwise fashion, we're going to be entering into a clockwise orbit around the moon, opposite retrograde. Now to do that, we're going to get in close, we're going to dip in off the lunar surface, we're going to be about 80 miles, 80 statute miles off the lunar surface as we do this outbound powered flyby. Again, the major thrust coming from that orbital maneuvering system engine. After we do that, we'll do a
Developed by the Europeans.
actually go into that distant retrograde orbit, that DRO. Now, why DRO? Why are we not just going around the moon and coming back on like a free return trajectory, which you did on some of the Apollo missions? Well, in DRO, it's a very stable orbit. It doesn't require a lot of fuel to maintain that area around the moon. So it gives you a lot of time to really test the spacecraft. If you followed with any launch of a new spacecraft, you know there's only so much testing you can do on the ground. Once you actually put all of that hardware in
Jonathan, SpaceX has a SpaceX is going to be involved with the lunar lander. That's where their contract is. Something called Halo, but I can't remember exactly what Halo stands for. That is the part of the project that deals with the landing of people, not only landing of people onto the moon, but also with building permanent habitation.
And heading on back towards Earth. We'll dip in once more, close off the lunar surface, slingshot and use the lunar gravity to do this return powered flyby. And then, similar to the way out, we can make correction burns as we kind of fine tune our path back towards the Earth. then it's time for re-entry. A couple of things happen before that. One of the really critical ones, spacecraft separation. We're going to detach.
Yes, so, or at least outside of this mission, which is just getting things to the moon. I think SpaceX is more going to be involved in terms of the Gateway space station and just getting things to and from the moon once that space station is in place.
When we come back, we are going in speeds of excess of 20,000 miles an hour. So when we slam into the Earth's atmosphere, it's going to heat that thing up to more than 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. For the Artemis 1 profile, we're going to do what's known as a skip re-entry. So basically, you can come in too shallow and skip off the atmosphere to narrow, and you're going to do what's known as a ballistic entry, which really heats things up. We're going to do kind of a mix where we're going to skip once off the atmosphere, and that we're still going to get the heat, but that helps to reduce some of the G loads on the crew. Once you're through that, you get to
Slow the thing down.
deploy. There's 11 parachutes in total.
Carl, yes, we are living in interesting times. I've mentioned JWST. Obviously, we had that wonderful talk this afternoon or this evening, but between JWST and the Artemis project or the Artemis, the Artemis project, excuse me, we are going to see just leaps and bounds in terms of not only our astronomical knowledge. Like I said, JWST is going to literally cause textbooks to be rewritten. But now we're also getting to the point where we can put boots on the ground and literally get our hands dirty in terms of studying the moon, the moon's composition, its geology, and then ultimately, I think, not within our own lifetime, but potentially within our children's lifetime, the next generation, that same thing is going to happen on Mars as well.
And just the first step before we put people on board. So that's a look at everything still to come. Counting down to that launch. I'll send it back over to Megan and the team at the host desk, guys.
A very comprehensive look at that. Thank you so much, Dan. If you're just joining us, welcome to Kennedy Space Center and our live coverage of Artemis 1, an uncrewed flight test that will return us to the moon in nearly 50 years. You know, some might ask, why the moon? Well, here's why.
We are going.
Slowly.
History of this ancient
All right.
is
I'm going to mute this.
What
Oh, that's the space elevator. I haven't heard any news about the space elevator in years, if not over a decade. I don't know if that's ever going to happen. Mainly because so I don't know if that's ever going to happen simply because of the way that SpaceX is going and the way just sort of the industry seems to be going. They're really not investing too much into the space elevator idea, more of just reusable rockets that we can use or that can be used to take payloads up and down. One of the things that is currently being proposed, which I think is a little pie in the sky, but who knows, is the idea of sending up small modular payloads, putting them in low Earth orbit, and then bringing up more of them and basically just putting together larger structures in sort of a tinker toy sort of way. One of the things that I'm highly skeptical about is this is one of the answers towards one of the answers for the space pollution that we are inevitably going to get is instead of building large aperture telescopes on the Earth, we're just going to build them in space using this process of small payloads that can then fit together to make a larger kind of tinker toy kind of thing. I don't know. I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical that's actually going to happen. Would there be some tension at pulling the elevator up. I don't know too much about how the elevator would get constructed, but the idea is you have a carbon. These elevators would be made up of carbon nanotubes, or at least carbon fiber, and carbon fiber has an amazing tensile strength in one direction, and so it can feasibly withstand the basically the shearing that would happen if you built such a large structure on a spinning object. So I think what they're battling with now is, right now they have carbon nanotubes in as working models, and as you probably have guessed from the name, nanotubes are really, really tiny. So I think I would imagine the problem that they're facing is scaling that up to a point where they could actually be useful for hauling payloads up and down. Let's see. I've seen some interesting ideas recently. There seems to be a growing field that might be workable using graphene and similar concepts. Yeah, I would not be surprised if Anton Petrov did cover it. He has a fabulous YouTube channel. He's one of my favorite science communicators. Him and Sabine are wonderful. Ryan, now I hear the much less crazy idea is just to have a sort of conveyor belt that goes to the upper atmosphere, extends out to a decent orbit, so you can fling stuff out there. That's an idea. What has become a problem, or what is becoming a problem, and I've mentioned this before on my channel, and this is something that is really is not being discussed, is I hesitate to do it that way, and one of the reasons why I'm not really in favor of the Tinker Toy approach of building things in space is that while one might think that space is large around the Earth, we have plenty of space to have stuff orbiting. In actual fact, when you look at where things need to orbit in order to do the more common tasks that we want it to do, space gets really small. There are literally space lanes around the Earth that are becoming very, very dense, or at least startlingly dense. One statistic that I found to be very startling was, within the last year, the total number of satellites that have been launched has doubled. So if you take all of the satellites that have been launched from 1959 from Sputnik all the way to last year, we have put up an equal amount of satellites during the last year than we did over that entire decade, or over those entire decades. And so we are approaching very quickly, and without very much forethought, we are potentially heading into a almost catastrophic regime where it's kind of like, I can't remember the specific name for it, but it was represented in gravity, not very well, but from my understanding, it was represented in gravity, in that you can have, if you have a collision, that would set off a chain reaction of collisions that would essentially make that orbital path completely unusable, because there would just be too many things traveling at such a high rate of speed that anything you try to fly through it would in fact get damaged, probably irreparably. I do know one of the things that they needed to work around with the first launch of Artemis 1 was they needed to communicate with SpaceX to find out whether or not any of their satellites were going to interfere with the launching of the Artemis. And so I don't know if it's because they don't want to piss off Elon or what, but NASA seems to be rather tight-lipped about the growing problem of space debris space debris in low Earth orbit and a little bit beyond. So, what is my current confidence in the launch? Well, do you mean that it's going to launch, or that when launched it's going to succeed?
Megan, we're going back to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. That was such Here we are now.
I'm becoming less confident that it's going to launch tonight. It was 90% at the beginning when I first signed on. The weather was 90%. Now,
Seeing children and young and old.
now I'm getting a little bit concerned that they are not giving us any updates as to why the countdown has been
Oh my God,
delayed.
I love this.
So,
David Marshall in Huntsville there.
oh, I like the
Always
little
their shot.
astronaut back there. So, given the fact that they're really not giving us any information as to why there is a delay at this point, I'm becoming less pessimistic.
Inflatable astronaut in the center. Do you see that?
Same, Ryan. Thank you for dropping by.
Representing. I love this. Yeah, I'm so glad that they're there. Again, these visitor centers are closed to the
Oh,
public.
Joe, the fact that it's made up of cannibalized space shuttle parts. No, actually, I think that's a bonus in the sense that this is technology which we have used, which we know is reliable, and so if, heaven forbid, this fails, I don't think it's going to be with the solid rocket boosters. It's going to be with the SRS rocket itself. So.
Can't wait to see Orion and SLS launch. Okay, so now let's head back over to Daryl Nail over with the launch team so we can hear any updates about a new T0.
Yeah, Megan, thank you. And a clearer picture is starting to emerge as the launch team now reports that
Exactly.
they only have a few minutes left of work to do before they're ready to pick up polling. And we're also hearing that some of that polling, which kicks off with the mission management team, is also now just about 3.5 minutes away. Now, we are currently still in that hold. But the launch team, NASA's test director, is continuing to move the team forward. We've wrapped up work on the upper stage and the lower stage. You're looking now live inside Firing Room 1. Our launch director, Charlie Blackwell Thompson, is overseeing her launch team. We've had a number of delays that have put us off the T0, but we are starting to track to a T0 close to around a quarter till, top of the hour. But we do need to have some polling that takes place. I'm pausing now because I'm listening in to the teams as they communicate.
I haven't watched the second season of Space Force. The first season was pretty good.
In this launch window, which we're currently 26 minutes into, and it's 2 hours long, it runs until 3:04 a.m. Eastern Time. We have what's called 40 cutouts. And in those cutouts, they range from about a second to about a minute. These are times where they can't launch. These cutouts must be accounted for when determining a new T0.
Why do the cutouts exist?
The upper stage of
Are you going to tell us
the
this?
rocket, which
No.
was the last to get ready and configured,
I suspect it has
just
something to do with
recently,
the
team
space debris
cycled
that's
the
up there.
liquid hydrogen valves, which is required. And they are currently working on the LO2 valves, liquid oxygen valves in the upper stage.
Carl, I would not be surprised if the rocket industry or the space industry gets to the point where we're slapping advertising on these things.
We are now a minute and a half away from the poll of the mission management team, which is several minutes before T-minus 15 minutes.
Oh yeah, well, Spaceship 1 and 2, that's Branson. I mean, that's
Clearer picture
Branson is stated that he's not really interested. He really is only interested in space tourism. So he is really not interested in anything beyond making money by taking people up and having a thrill ride in low Earth orbit.
NASA's test director has informed the launch team.
Yeah, I can also see Musk
all
doing it.
switch to a common communication channel. It's called 230.
Maybe that's how he's going to advertise Twitter.
232.
Stick a whole bunch of Twitter stickers all over his
The entire
SpaceX
launch
rockets.
team is now on one channel, and all future communication will happen there. Whereas there are many channels. Now they reduce it down to one. Just heard from NASA Test Director Carlos Monge. I'm sorry, Jeff Spaulding. Jeff Spaulding's on. They swapped out. There are currently no constraints to launch.
Yep.
Great news. Again,
Woohoo!
no constraints.
Hi,
to
Dr.
launch.
Nimrod. Thank you for joining us.
With a poll to determine readiness for launch.
All right. So they're pulling the work crews off. I don't know what this polling is, if I'm hearing them correctly. I do apologize. I'm not a rocketry expert, so this sort of thing I'm not overly familiar with, but it does sound like they're getting forward. They're moving forward with this, and hopefully we will launch before 1:45. That is my hope, because yeah, I should have known. I should have known that it wasn't actually going to launch at 1:04 this morning, because obviously I have stuff to do and tomorrow, and so yeah,
NASA
just
Test
nature
Director
hates me.
Jeff Spaulding getting ready to conduct the readiness poll, so we are getting close.
Oh, all right. Readiness poll. They're basically going to say, "Hey, does that
We're
work?"
gonna pull up
Yes.
the audio now, so that you can listen in.
You go. And rockets go.
Yes,
All right,
Dr.
copy.
Nimrod. I think that's correct.
And launch director and
Yes,
TD,
they
our
are
launch team is
taunting
ready
me.
to proceed at this time.
I copy all entity. At this time, I will proceed with my poll.
Yes, so exciting!
And
Exciting!
232, this is the launch director performing the final poll for launch. Verify no constraints and go for launch. EGS Program Chief Engineer.
EGS Program Chief Engineer verifies that the EGS, SLS, and Orion Program Chief Engineers have no constraints and are go for launch.
Copy, Greg. Thank you. EGS Chief Safety Officer.
The EGS CSO verifies the SLS, Orion, and EGS CSOs have no constraints and are go for launch.
Copy, John. Thank you.
Woohoo!
Range weather. Weather has no constraints and weather is go for launch. Copy LWO and Mission Manager.
Uh-oh. Mission Manager, where are you? Where are you, Mission Manager?
And Mission Manager, Launch Director.
Launch Director, Mission Manager 232. The mission management team has been pulled. You have a go to proceed with terminal count and launch of Artemis 1.
I copy all. Thank you. And entity, Launch Director.
Yes, go no go is much cooler than polling.
Yes, sir. On behalf of all the men and women across our great nation who have worked to bring this hardware together to make this day possible, and for the Artemis generation, this is for you. At this time, I give you a go to resume count and launch Artemis 1.
Woo! Yeah!
Thank you.
Now I'm getting stoked.
Steps to configure, and then we will be ready to resume the clock. CVSE, NTD. CVSE here. Initiate recording of Orion cameras at this time. In word. RNTD. RSO here. Perform the booster ignition SNA on rotation enable.
Oh, don't worry about that, Imran. I'm glad you're here. I mean, shit, getting a titanium plate, that's not fun at all.
That copy. Thank you.
Okay, so there you heard the poll from Launch Director. Getting ready to get that new
No, it is
T-Zero
not
started.
wrong to be excited by it. This is fantastic. This is just, yeah. Oh my God. I remember watching shuttle launches.
The NASA test director's poll. And
All right, and we have verified no cutouts at
Those
this time. And all personnel, we are going to resume the clock. GLS, you can resume the clock on your mark.
GLS copies. Countdown clock will resume on my mark. 3, 2,
Oh yeah.
1, mark. GLS mainline has been initiated.
okay,
T-minus 10 minutes and counting.
we are T-minus 10 minutes away from liftoff of Artemis 1. As you can see, the clock is now moving. Let's put that up.
Woohoo!
T-minus 9 minutes and 47 seconds. The L-minus 18 poll complete.
Show 6, 47, 44 is the new liftoff time.
Affirm.
I gotta say, I've told this story before, so I don't know if I've said it on the stream. So I beg your pardon if you've heard this before, but
47 a.m. Eastern Time and 44 seconds.
when I was a grad student, I was a grad student at University of Florida for my master's degree, and I was sitting in the grad office doing something, probably trying to beat my head up against a Fortran code.
9 minutes away.
And a group of my other grad students came in and said, like, hey, a shuttle's launching tonight. I think it was Discovery.
The GLS.
And,
launch sequencer.
or Discover?
Computer and software that is doing all of the commanding and monitoring of the Space Launch System.
And they were like, hey, we're going to go watch the shuttle launch. You want to come with me or come with us? And I was like, well, hell yeah. So we just spontaneously drove from Gainesville to Cape Canaveral. And oh my God, it was a night launch. I will never forget that. That was fun, and that was just phenomenal. And with this, I can't imagine what this is going to be like, because these engines are just dwarf the engines off of that space shuttle. So I can imagine the noise off this thing. I wouldn't be surprised if they couldn't hear this from Tampa. Oh yeah, I really wish that I could have, that I had taken a camera. Well, this is obviously way before cell phones and video cameras, but I would have loved to have been able to record that moment.
Performing up to 100 commands per second, including configuring ground systems for power.
I'm so excited. Yeah, I think the flat earthers are basically just going to ignore this as much as they can. They're just going to stick their fingers in their ears and la 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 la. I'm hoping that folks like Dan the Waterman, he will see this and be a little bit more convinced that we are going to space and so forth. But
you can see the crew access arm is already retracted. When there is crew during Artemis 2, it would happen at T-minus 6 minutes. But out of abundance of caution, they went ahead and retracted the arm well ahead of liftoff.
yeah, I do know that there is a delay between my stream and reality of about 20, 30 seconds.
The pressure caused by the rocket's ignition and thunderous sound, it could damage the rocket. So the ignition overpressure and sound suppression system will flood the mobile launcher with water. You'll see that sequence start at T-minus 17 seconds.
That's interesting. I didn't realize they were going to use water to essentially muffle
30 seconds.
the
Ground launch sequencer will start bringing the high
sound.
systems online, starting with core stage pressurization.
Please don't explode. Please don't explode. Please don't explode.
Fireman 1 is completely silent as they listen for the next call.
Can you imagine being on this thing?
Tank pressurization.
like, obviously this is not manned, but imagine being on the top of this
Pressurizing to flight
giant
levels.
friggin' rocket.
The replenish valve to the liquid hydrogen tank now closing.
I mean, Jesus. Being on, I can't remember how Buzz Aldrin, I think it was Buzz Aldrin, he was basically talking about being on a,
Now we're arming the Orion
being at
assist
the top
pyros.
of like a nuclear weapon or bomb or whatever. It was just,
The launch abort system, or LAS jettison motor,
yes,
is now
Saturn
on.
V, yeah.
On this flight, the abort motor is inactive because there is no crew on board. Up next is the flight termination system, or FTS, which gives the Space Force the ability to destruct.
I actually don't know what the Kiwanis, I don't know what that soundtrack is.
GLS go for FTS arm.
The flight termination system is now armed. Coming up at 4 minutes and 40 seconds, a big moment. This is where the RS-25 engines and their bleed go to high flow. It's been a little tricky to dial in.
I will have to look into that.
GLS go for LH2 high flow bleed check.
Oh, all right. I heard that Interstellar sort of
Past that,
ripped off something.
the cryo team got the LH2 engine bleed pressure loop dialed in.
Kind of curious about that open flame that's just kind of hanging out over there.
T-minus 4 minutes, 15 seconds. Up next, GLS fires up the KPUs. Those are high-speed turbines which provide pressure to hydraulic pumps that steer the RS-25s. Stands for Core Stage Auxiliary Power Unit Start.
GLS go for core stage APU start.
That now leads to the thrust vector control test at T-minus 2 minutes and 30 seconds. That can proceed now, and we will see the engine
No,
gimbal
that doesn't work.
at the bottom of the core stage.
I was hoping to be able to do the whole screen. Hold on, maybe I can.
At T-minus 3 minutes and 10 seconds, you will hear the go for purge sequence 4. That's a helium purge of the 4 core stage engines downstream of the propellant valve, getting the air and moisture out.
GLS go for purge sequence 4.
And in just a few seconds, GLS will close the core stage LOX vent, liquid oxygen. The white vapor cloud caused from the super cold gaseous oxygen condensing the water in the atmosphere will disappear. You see it coming out there now. And there it goes, it's closed. LOX vent closed, pressure rising in the core stage LOX tank to flight levels. Coming up in 15 seconds, look for that thrust vector control actuator test.
Figure you guys don't need to actually see me. God, that's huge. It's just,
And there they go. The 4 core stage
hi.
RS-25 engines gimbaling around, testing the ability to steer the rocket into space.
Okay, that's just beyond cool.
They will operate at 109% performance. Each RS-25 throwing down 500,000 pounds of thrust. All 4, 2 million pounds. All together with the boosters, 8.8 million pounds of thrust.
GLS go for upper stage to internal power.
Now the upper
I don't want to
move from the rocket's upper stage.
get in the way of anyone's any of the views.
Battery power. The same milestone is coming up for the core stage at
NASA.
1 minute and 30 seconds.
What's gonna happen? Yeah, you gotta watch out for the gimbal.
GLS go for core stage to internal power.
The rocket's core stage, which houses the 3 flight computers, is now on battery power. So there is no more hold time available because there's no more margin on the batteries. So if we have a hold, cycle back to T-minus 10 minutes and recharge those batteries.
Yeah, I am curious what kind of camera views we're gonna get when this thing
A
launches.
note now, shortly after liftoff,
1 minute.
shortly after liftoff, Mission Control Houston will take control.
Less than a minute. Less than a minute.
Leah Chekhov will take over commentary. T-minus 50 seconds and counting. Coming up at T-minus 33 seconds, the GLS will hand off control to the ALS. This is the autonomous launch sequencer on board the rocket. It will take over command and control of the rocket. But the ALS will check, make sure there's no holds coming from the ground up until T-minus 3
GLS,
seconds.
go for ALS.
And we are go for ALS. The Space Launch System is
Yay!
now counting down to liftoff of Orion on its maiden voyage to the moon.
We're going back to the moon.
Launch team can no longer recycle the count.
To the moon.
Sound suppressor water now flowing under the ML.
I think they should have a picture of Gru on there.
Hydrogen burn off reserves initiate. 7, 6, 5, 4 stage engine start. 3, 2, 1. Boosters in ignition. And liftoff of Artemis 1. We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
All 4 RS-25 engines on the core stage and 2 solid rocket boosters now propelled
That is-
at 128 miles per hour.
That is just nuts. That is, oh my God. There are no words for this.
Control on the roll from teams in Mission Control Houston. All good calls so far. Now 30 seconds into the flight of Artemis 1.
I would love to be in Florida right now.
About 1 minute and 9 seconds into launch. This is the greatest period of atmospheric force on the rocket.
And for me to say that I would love to be in Florida at any point is saying something.
SLS now traveling 607 miles per hour. You're looking at 8.8 million pounds of maximum thrust quiet here. In our loops of mission control. Full course engines will throttle down, head past and execute.
Jesus. Look at that rocket plume. In comparison to the size of that rocket,
Now 1 minute, 21 seconds into the flight,
I
traveling at 1,000
think how large that rocket is, and that's the plume coming off that
Course
thing.
engines are back at maximum thrust. The next major milestone will be for the solid rocket boosters to cut off and jettison about 2 minutes and 11 seconds into the flight, so about 30 seconds from now. Again, quiet here in Mission Control Houston as teams continue monitoring the flight of Artemis 1. We're now 16 miles downrange from the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center, traveling over 2,800 miles per hour. Standing by for solid rocket booster jettison and shortly thereafter.
There it goes.
Confirmation that the solid rocket boosters have separated these 177-foot boosters.
Yep.
Now the core stage continues to power the flight of Orion, all 4 RS-25 engines firing, traveling over 3,400 miles per hour, 46 miles downrange.
Yeah, that's what it
2
looked
minutes
like.
and 36 seconds into the flight.
Oh yeah, science.
On our calls here in Mission Control.
Well,
Houston.
Reds is a
We still
rocket.
have 4 good engines on the core stage. Next up will be
He's a rocket
looking for the
enthusiast,
service
so
module
I-
fairing
I-
to
I'm not
separate.
surprised
This
that he
is
has a better
15 by
feed.
15-foot fairing panels, providing structural support, protecting the service module. Those will separate at about 3 minutes and 11 seconds into flight, and very shortly thereafter will be followed by the launch abort system separation. Just over 3 minutes into the flight of Artemis 1, now traveling over 4,060 miles per hour, 83 miles downrange.
Oh, Jonathan, if you're talking about the solid rocket boosters, they're going to crash. They're going to crash into the ocean. Oh, all right.
And that the launch abort system pyros have fired, separating those from Orion as well.
As far as I know, yeah, they're both the solid rocket boosters and the main stage are going to jettison into the are meant to go into the ocean. I don't know which oceans, but
We just heard the call for 3-engine press, meaning if SLS were to lose an engine at this point in the mission, we could still achieve a nominal mission. We would just have an extended main engine cutoff time. However, we still have 4 good engines, all at maximum thrust right now, powering the first flight of Artemis at 5,200 miles per hour, 148 miles downrange.
I'm assuming this is CGI. I don't think they have a camera flying along with the Artemis rocket.
Seconds into the flight of Artemis 1. So far, we've had a clean ascent. We saw the solid rocket boosters jettison about 2 minutes and 11 seconds after liftoff. Shortly after, we have the service module panels, fairings separate, as well as the launch abort system. The launch abort system.
Science. That should have been easy for me to figure out.
Those 4 core stage engines will continue to fire and power the flight of Artemis 1, now traveling over 6,800 miles per hour, 229 miles downrange. Booster flight controller reports that the engines are looking good.
Fantastic.
Our core stage main engine cutoff time is about 8 minutes and 3 seconds. We are now at 5 minutes and 11 seconds into the flight, 7,656 miles per hour. Again, 4 good core stage engines, those 4 RS-25 engines.
Oh yeah.
The last time those core stage engines
And the fact that it hasn't hit the dome, that's also impressive. I mean, you figure that at this point they would have hit the dome by now.
5 minutes, 42 seconds into the mission, we are now traveling 8,800 miles per hour, 345 miles downrange from the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center. Again, we are anticipating core stage main engine cutoff at about 8 minutes and 3 seconds. And about 10 seconds later, we'll see core stage separation, at which point Orion and the interim cryogenic propulsion stage will be flying free.
Woohoo!
Now traveling over 10,000 miles per hour, 6 minutes and 15 seconds into the flight of Artemis 1, 427 miles downrange. Quiet here on the loops in Mission Control Houston. Teams continue to monitor this first flight.
Yeah, I didn't think we'd see this thing launch either. As I was saying before, this is with this and accompanied with JWST, we are truly entering in a new era of not just space exploration, but space exploration, not just research from an academic or research point of view, but from a practical point of view at this point. It is. Oh my God, it is just, it is awe-inspiring to think what we're going to learn and what we're going to be doing within the next decade. It's just, it really hasn't hit me until now, what all this means, what all this is going to mean in the future. Oh my God. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to really rethink my my ASTR 103 course to incorporate all of this. This is amazing.
Now 7 minutes 45 seconds into the flight, traveling over 16,000 miles per hour. Continuing to hear good calls here in Mission Control Houston. We're standing by for core stage main engine cutoff.
Yes, my lectures are officially out of date.
Main engine cutoff. Orion, and it's now in Earth's orbit. The flight dynamics officer reports the nominal main engine cutoff. And we just heard the call for core stage separation. That means Orion and the interim cryogenic propulsion stage are now flying free from the core stage of the Space Launch System. The next milestone will be solar array deploy approximately 18 minutes after liftoff. But before Orion stretches its wings, let's check back in with our friends at Kennedy Space Center and hear all about what it was like to hear the rocket roar off the launch pad. Megan and Kayla, I've got to hear all about it.
Well, if you're just joining us, welcome to NASA's Kennedy Space Center, where we
Well, folks, if I just heard that correctly, the next milestone is going to be in 18 minutes or so. Oh yes, so we were mentioning the Space Force earlier today. I've seen season 1, but I haven't managed to get to season 2 yet.
I feel the same way. This is
So
the first launch that I've been able to watch in person, and I've got to say, it was incredible. I was just took my breath away, and I was tearing up. Just what an amazing accomplishment for this team, this international team. People who have been dedicated.
yeah, this astronaut. She flew, I think, on the 3rd service mission to the ISS using the Dragon capsule. So she was saying that she hadn't seen any launches except for her own, and she's like, well, that's it's a little bit different.
to get a really good view, and boy, I mean, it lit up the night sky, and it just shook everything around. Did you feel that, like, in my bones?
I have to find out what that quote is.
The cool thing is just kind of the delay between what you see and what you hear, because of course the sound travels a little bit slower, and it was just
A little bit slower?
The ground
A lot slower.
You could hear the thrust pushing that rocket into space. 8.8 million pounds of thrust.
Yes.
It was incredible. It was amazing to see here live in person.
How does it compare? So this is your first launch on
All right, folks. Yeah, it's really early for me. I have a long day, and I have class tomorrow. So I am. Let's turn this back on. Let's do that. So yeah, thank you all for being with me on this historic event. I will definitely be making content about this. I'm a little disappointed that we didn't get any footage of the capsule or the main rocket separation, but as I am fond of telling flat earthers, there's only so much weight you can put on there, so there's really no reason to, if you've got modern telemetry, there's really no reason to put a camera on it. But thank you, student. I appreciate that. It's like I said, again, thank you all for being here. It really means a lot to me that you watch this historic moment with me. I am going to stop the stream and peace out, everyone. And again, I really hope to be able to bring out more content. The first thing that I'm going to do, first piece of content that's not a lecture, is definitely going to be on this and its implications. So, all right.